The buzz around Indiana football recruiting continues to grow, but how big can it get?
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into the portal. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and recruiting analyst. Thank you for making the portal your first listen each and every day. Truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some recruiting, NIL, and transfer portal. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if they win their first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. To find out what's going on with Indiana Hoosiers, it's pretty simple. We got to talk to our guy that runs all the action over there on Locked On Hoosier, Jacob Goins. Jacob, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic, man. Even though basketball season may not be going the way we want it to, we got a coaching search happening in Bloomington, so that's kind of exciting, right? And even more exciting is there's recruiting news to talk about in February for Indiana football. It truly is a miracle, Brian. You know that as an IU grad. It's unprecedented times happening right now in Bloomington.
Yeah, I did not anticipate ever doing an IU football recruiting podcast in February.
But here we are.
Yeah, it's when I was growing up, that those would have been words to get you thrown out of the house or something. What is wrong with you? You're mentally ill. But now it's totally different. So that's what I want to talk about first. We'll get into several prospects from the 26 and even one 2027 prospect here in a minute. But the proclamation that I want to make is that Indiana has changed its recruiting strategy. Throughout this podcast, I'm going to talk about that. They have upped the ante. They are now going for players that, honestly, even if they offered them back in the day, it would have been like, okay, yeah, well, that's fantastic. I mean, you just wasted stationery sending that young man an official offer because they're not going to even visit. So now it's different. You go to the playoff after an 11-win season. You go and you beat the crap out of some really good teams. That changes perception. And now they're even getting some looks from East Coast, IMG Academy, etc. Wherever you look, Indiana's got a bit of an in now because they're part of the in crowd. Jacob, were you surprised to see this much? I mean, early last season, I'm sure you thought, okay, well, we need to see a little more. But at what point did you realize they were going to start being able to get in on some of these hot players?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reasonable expectations when Curt Cignetti was hired was it can't get any worse, so let's see where it goes. And that was in all aspects of Indiana football, whether it was the on-field product, the fan buy-in, the money investment, or just the recruiting numbers in the high school rankings. And just like that, Cignetti has turned it around to where you have in-state kids, surrounding state kids who are interested in IU. And I've talked about on Locked On Hoosiers several times how it's a domino effect. It really is a trendy business. You know this, to where when you get one or two somewhat big names or big names, right? 3, 4, 5 stars, even if they just give Indiana a look, they all talk, they all know what's going on, and other kids start to think and kind of look around and think, hey, what's happening at Indiana other than the 11-win season that they just had in a college football playoff, right? You were hoping and expecting some recruiting success to come with that. And I think when you started winning games this past season, it was, oh, Indiana's kind of legit. Kids started coming on campus. They wanted official visits. And for home games down the stretch, man, we had dozens of football recruits on campus to watch the football games. A crazy statement here, but that's what was happening. And so it's kind of just been a snowball effect, I think, for Curt Cignetti. And now here in the offseason, you've got kids setting up their official visits for June and July. I've never heard of that here. And kids want to know what's happening in Bloomington, and a lot of them are coming to check it out.
Well, if you really think about Indiana football, it just has such a bad history. I'm not surprised that you would look at it that way because I don't really know anybody in the media that doesn't. And we were all shocked towards the end of this year at the Under Armour and everything else. A few kids talking about Indiana, a few of the media members. So we kind of had to add that to our repertoire, like ask about different schools, who's the hot team and stuff. Never imagined it would be Indiana. So first off, hats off to my alma mater for actually figuring out football after a while. It took them long enough. But at the same time, there's the next step. And that's what we're going to talk about from the rest of this point forward on this show. In-state recruiting is key. but you also have to go there's certain positions you got to get players. Like Indiana is in a situation where if they don't go out and get a few defensive tackles every year or corners, there's just certain premium positions. So I'm going to track that. But the other thing that's really interesting to me is just like official visits in general. Looking at some of the guys they have coming in, it's not an unbelievable list, but they finally started getting some guys that I'm like, okay, I know who that is. Like Cameron McHaney, we'll talk about in a few minutes. He's a defensive tackle at IMG Academy. He's a national top 250 kid.
Yeah.
He can't teach 300 pounds. Now, he's originally from Indianapolis, but at the same time, that doesn't mean he has to go back.
Yeah, I mean, when you play at IMG, you can go anywhere because all the biggest schools know every single player on that roster their entire careers. And the fact that Indiana, again, is in that loop and he wants to come and check out Indiana, that's that type of name I'm talking about. I know we're going to dive into him a little bit later, but he's the type of name that when he sets the official visit, other kids are like, whoa, wait. Why? Why is he going there? Why is he checking it out? Maybe I'll do the same thing. That's that snowball domino effect that I'm talking about.
Like there's another example, Benedictine Military School in Savannah, Georgia. They've won multiple state titles. They have kids going all over the country from there. They've got a kid that's a D lineman, is a big time recruit. He's got official visit set up with Indiana. That school is never going to send kids to Indiana. You know, they all stay down south, etc. Now it's cool to go to Indiana and at least check like what's going on there.
Yeah.
There's a kid from McEachern just outside Atlanta, one of the most tradition-rich programs in the state of Georgia, has a visit signed up with the Hoosiers. So I'm very excited about that aspect of it, Jacob, because I don't know who's next. My only question for the out-of-state recruiting, I mean, in-state's self-explanatory. Do they find a niche in an area? They were out in Virginia, so I kind of thought that, you know, the Virginia 757/DC, but that's very highly competitive. That was my first guess. But can they find a niche somewhere? And we'll find out later this spring. But that's something that's really important. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the official visits. We're going to talk about some big-time players right here on the portal, the crossover with Locked On Hoosiers. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you missed the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay on the action, and that's not even a problem at all if you want to get a bigger payout because you can combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the action exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three. I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when I win, get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can bet or get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, brother. The biggest thing that I think Indiana has to do is kind of finish out on some of these visits. We went through a few kids, and I watched film on these guys. One I didn't have to, and that's McHaney. Again, we'll talk about him in a moment. But I just kind of want to go through a handful of guys that you sent me. First off, Trevor Gibbs, tight end / linebacker out of Crown Point up in the northwest part of the state, the region. He's a guy that is a very talented player, got great hands, a thumper. Crown Point's always had some athletes, but it's random when you're going to get a kid like this that's as big as him. I think they might be able to steal this kid because he's better than he's ranked. He's like a 3-star.
Yeah, 3-star.
Laughed because of where he's from. If he was in Indianapolis, he'd be looked at differently. It's just kind of how that works. This is the kind of kid where Indiana can build something. Flexibility, because he can play tight end, H-back, maybe defensive end, definitely middle linebacker. These are the kinds of spots where Indiana, in the front seven, they've always got run on all the time. I'd play him on defense if I could. It's harder to find defensive guys.
Yeah.
And he's a thumper. Getting a visit early, making sure you keep guys at home. I doubt Notre Dame goes after him. They're in on so many guys that are D linemen, tight ends. I doubt they do. So that's the biggest in-state threat. Purdue is, wow, they might be the worst team in the Power Four. They're horrible. If you lose them to Purdue,
hey, can you say that again? Can you just say that one more time for me, Brian?
Purdue might be the worst team in the Power Four. They are horrible. I mean, they're so bad.
Love it.
They really are.
It's horrific. It is, and I hate it for them, I guess, kind of, not really. And so we're in a prime situation, Indiana is, because take advantage, right? Take advantage. Yeah, you're going up against Notre Dame, of course, but you're going up against Purdue too, and you can get the leg up there for a guy like this, who you said, I think defensively is probably where he'll go. He's listed as an athlete. So high school, you know how it is. You can play wherever you want to. IU's going to pull him in and say, we need you here. So that's where you're going to go. And he could be, I don't want to say a difference maker, but a noise maker in a recruiting class. If you get somebody like that in the state, people around here would at least take notice and go, nice win for them. That, as you said, a steal, I think, is a good word to use there. I really do like this kid. I think Gibbs is somebody that will continue to rise up the rankings. And the fact that he was in Indiana in Bloomington for junior day, he's got an official visit set. IU's doing all the right things. It just sees if it pays off or not.
Yeah, this is a great piece of scouting because a lot of people would overlook him. For instance, they've got Cashmere Hicks lined up for a visit. He's probably the best player in the state of Indiana for the senior class. He's from Decatur Central. It's not hard to find him. He's in the middle of Indianapolis. But finding kids like Gibbs, not everybody's going to be a 3-and-out guy. That'll be a really good program builder is important. And again, Indiana traditionally struggles with defense. And not that they did last year, but this is the kind of guy where you can start building your front seven with in-state recruits. You got to get those kind of kids, man.
Yeah.
And it's good they got the first visit. So that's one guy. The next guy is the one that I talked about. He's originally from Indiana and from Indianapolis. He played at Lutheran, I believe, before he went to IMG. My guy, Don Zalotti, who does all the recruiting and handles the roster there, told me one day when I was on campus, he goes, I got a kid coming from Indianapolis. It's really good. And I'm like, really? He didn't know I was from Indiana. I'm like, who is it? And he introduced me. The next time I was there, and this kid walks, I'm like, okay, that looks like a defensive tackle.
Yeah.
6'1", 290 pounds. Big, powerful kid, really nice until he puts on his helmet. And I'm like, well, that's what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And Indiana, I'm surprised he doesn't have a bunch of SEC offers, maybe because he's not the tallest guy. Illinois is involved in some other schools. Out of all the guys they got visiting that are out of state, to me, he might be the most important because, again, D-tackle, there are just so many guys that have that kind of frame, have that kind of size, and there's an extra cachet to this. It's different with IMG. Let me put it to you like this. I'm driving to Orlando to see the Under Armour event this next week or this coming Sunday. Right after, IMG Academy has its own Under Armour event for one school the following Thursday every year. And then after that, we drive to Miami and they have another event for the area. That's the only school that gets one.
Kind of shows what's going on over there, does it not? Kind of shines a light on what's happening at IMG. And when Indiana is able to go and at least get a sniff, just get an idea of what's happening here, it's never really happened. And it speaks to so many things: the coaching staff, the success, the program, the NIL. We're dumb if we say it's not a part of it. Your show is focused on parts of NIL. I mean, it is a major factor. But people have this weird conception that Indiana just doesn't have money, which is insane. And they think the money they do have is all going towards basketball. But Curt Cignetti said, yeah, we're going to change that a little bit. If you want me to be here and you want me to win, you've got to give me what I need. And you don't go after guys like McHaney if you can't pay him and play him. And I think that's what the Hoosiers are trying to do. And he looks like a power 4 lineman. That's what he is. I mean, he's going to be legit, and he's going to be in Indiana in Bloomington late June. And he would be the focal point of a recruiting class and could be somebody you build around with either other high school recruits or transfer portal success like we've seen Indiana have. And I wanted to ask you this, Brian, just kind of as we go on here. Does portal success for a program like Indiana, does it have any bleed over to high school recruiting success? I mean, does a high schooler like McHaney, for example, does he see the fact that Indiana went in the portal and got big names? Does that have any effect on guys like him? I'm genuinely curious.
It can. It depends on the player. Keep in mind that we're kind of new to this. It's only been going on for a few years, but
sure,
I think more than anything else, it's not the portal. It's Indiana's just winning.
Yeah.
And they were coached up. They took a bunch of kids predominantly from G5. They didn't take the Alabama, Georgia, Texas, USC offered guys. They took kids that had proven production from the G5 and, schools like Liberty and wherever. and they brought him in. And what happened? They went 11-1. So he sees that they get a chance to kind of shine. And again, he's still, even though he's an IMG, he's been overlooked a little bit, and it's hilarious. I've seen him play. I know what he can do. But at the same time, Indiana doesn't care. They don't. They want to see that guy come back home. Again, he's from Indiana. He played in Indianapolis before he went to IMG. Getting a guy like that sets a precedent, not only because it's IMG, that you can get D linemen. Because they got a couple guys out of the transfer portal for D line last year. They weren't good. They were really good. That's the difference. Yeah. Indiana gave Notre Dame's offensive line fits, except for the long run by a certain running back who's going to play a very long time in this thing they call the National Football League. They pretty much gave Notre Dame's offensive front fits. It was one of the better run blocking teams in the country. They got those guys out of the portal and immediately got them. So they can pitch to him, hey, if you come here to Bloomington, we'll have multiple years to work with you. I mean, it's just fact. So
it's a good pitch. It is. It's a really good pitch. And it's in this new era where people are, and programs and coaches are trying to decide, do we go heavy portal? Do we go heavy high school? What's the mixture? Is it 50-50, 60-40? Like, everybody's trying to figure that mix out. But when you have an opportunity to get somebody like McHaney, you go after him. Now, whether IU gets him or not, I don't know. But the fact that you're in the door, the fact that he's interested and wants to take a visit and is going to take a visit, it's a new era in Indiana football to where you're still going after the big fish, but it's not just throwing your bobber in there with 30 more. You're right now, you're one of the few in the pond, and you have a very good shot at landing somebody like this. I'm confident in that. I am.
Cameron McHaney is potentially a program changer up front, because if you look at the Final Four teams, what did they have in common, especially O-line? Homegrown, meaning they got them out of the high school ranks. All but like one or two guys that started on the O-line for the Final Four teams were high school recruits. D-line's a little different, but there still aren't a lot of them in the portal. Like this past window, the D-line options, oof, they were limited. If you don't get Cameron McHaney, what are you going to get later?
Yeah, it's true.
So you've got to start developing. Indiana hit the home run last year, but that may not be available down the road. So you've got to be sure to take your chances with the local kids first, make that happen, and then move forward. Another kid that I really liked, and I don't know how much success they'll have in the state of Michigan with the Wolverines. Michigan State's got a huge NIL, but I thought this was interesting. Lincoln Watkins, he's a tight end / he didn't have the kick play outside linebacker, defensive end. He's got Indiana for an official visit June 16th, NC State June 6th, Nebraska June 20th, and he's got some other things. But Indiana's kind of like he was talking about it in an article. Lincoln Watkins is talking about Indiana's kind of new to the party, but they went out and they just kicked the crap out of teams. That kind of proves the point we were just talking about, Jacob. If you're not going to win, it doesn't matter. He wouldn't have had this visit lined up. There wouldn't be an article mentioning Indiana. They had to win first. It's kind of the chicken and the egg, and they got past that, parts with the portal, but now you reap the benefits.
Yeah, I mean, breaking news, guys. Players want to win games. It's not all just about the money. They do want to develop, and they do want to win. And you're talking about somebody, you said NC State and Nebraska, right, where he's going to be taking other official visits. And look, I'm sure that list is going to grow. But if Indiana, it's crazy because the winning part is the part they've struggled with for so long. I've already talked about it. You and I have had conversations about the facilities at IU, how they're continuing to upgrade those. Curt Cignetti came in and said, this is what I want. This is how we're going to do it. Here we go. And that is all happening. Now, if you can win consistently, I'm not saying make it to the playoff in year 2 and win 11 games again. Would be great. Talk about recruiting success. It would go through the roof. But just to be competitive, and that really, I just feel like it resonates with a guy like Lincoln, who is a tight end out of Michigan, who could go and play at a lot of Power 4 schools, but Indiana jumped on him early. They're jumping on him often. They're throwing everything at these kids, and they can back it up. That's what Indiana's got for them right now. They can back it up with every aspect of those NIL and winning and development for now. Does that fall off in 3 or 4 years? I don't know. We'll find out. But at least after 1 year, Indiana can talk and back it up. And that is huge in recruiting. You know that.
Well, like Nebraska is a tradition-rich program. Before your time, when I was growing up, they were just dominant.
Sure.
And now they're kind of, We'll see. And it's hilarious to me that Indiana's above Nebraska. because in the 90s, you could argue they were the best program in America. I mean,
Yeah.
they were unbelievable. So that's part of it. And NC State's fallen off. And Indiana, like you and I were talking, their NIL is way better than most people know outside like the Hoosiers fan base. They've got some serious money. And the facilities are actually pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be, I'm not saying they're Nebraska good. They put everything into basketball or football there. You're not going to win in any other sport, maybe other than wrestling. So whatever. But the point is still the same. You can compete with that now. The question for kids like this, can you steal a few guys like that if Michigan or Michigan State offer? Can you steal a kid out of Virginia if Virginia Tech wants the kid, or out of North Carolina now that Belichick and his girlfriend Jordan Hudson, who's all of a sudden very famous? It's amazing how this stuff happens. We'll have to see. When we come back, we're going to talk about a couple more kids, including getting in on a big-time 2027 prospect. That's here on the crossover Locked on Hoosiers and the Portal. It's kind of funny to me that we are to the point where Indiana has all these official visits lined up. And I was just kind of scrolling before we came on. I mentioned earlier they got Cashmere Hicks, who I think is the most important player in the state. I actually talked to Steve Wiltfong. I'd asked him recently, and he said he thought Hicks was probably the best player in Indiana. He still lives in the Indianapolis area.
Sure.
They've got Brody McWhorter coming in for an official visit. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the South. He's just north of Atlanta. They've done all the little things to get guys from all over. Was there any part of this, even though after they were 11-1, that surprised you with all these visits? I mean, anybody can look this stuff up. Were you surprised at how many kids they got lined up already?
I am. Yeah, really. Because of the reputation, right? Because not just the reputation, Brian, but the negative recruiting that happens everywhere across the country. I mean, let's just be real. I mean, programs like Michigan and Ohio State, they haven't had to negatively recruit against IU, but Purdue and Notre Dame have, being in the state, and even the Illinois and the Wisconsins of the world have, when they need to, they throw a little jab and be like, Indiana, really? Are you really thinking about IU? Come on now. Okay, that's right. Come home. Now they really got to say, man, we got to up our game. We've got to compete with Indiana in recruiting, because you and I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago. Indiana's going after offensive linemen in Wisconsin, guys that are built and raised to be Badgers. And Indiana said, yeah, we don't really care. We'll go anywhere at any time and get anybody. And again, this is all whether it happens and works out or not. It's great to get kids on campus. It's great to talk to them in their living room. But if they don't sign on the dotted line, then it's all smoke and it doesn't really matter. But what I'm so impressed by is, yes, the quantity, yes, the quality, but just the work ethic and the process that Indiana's going through, where, again, they'll go to any state. They don't care. They're not. Indiana used to be worried and not even waste their time to go next door or go north, because they were like, well, we're not going to waste our gas to go to Michigan. That doesn't make any sense. But now when they see somebody that fits the program, fits the scheme, and they think could fit the culture, they go talk to them. They go find them out. And I think Indiana is successful in that part. And if some of these kids, when they get to campus, they've had nothing but great things to say, especially about the coaching staff, who has shown them so much love, so much put in a ton of effort and time for them and their families. And you know how that is, Brian. You've got to win everybody over, not just the player himself. And I think that's what is really surprising to me about Indiana so far.
Yeah, I mean, they've done that, and they put in the time in all kinds of programs. Another 26 kid, Jaden Williams, linebacker out of Massillon, Ohio, plays at Washington High School, one of the most famous programs in the Midwest and the United States. Indiana got on him early. Now, if Ohio State offers a little bit later, I don't know.
Sure.
But I love his film. He's a thumper, and he's a kid. You need to get some Ohio kids, even if they're not the elite of the elite. That state just loves football, and it's kind of like Indiana for high school hoops. Those kids are going to get better. That it means something to them. And I'll take kids from Washington High School every day. And I just happen to like Jaden's film anyhow. And they also have other kids from in-state that I'm not sure why they don't have more offers, like Blake Smith from Franklin Community. Franklin, I don't know how Indiana came about it, but they've done such a good job with it all over the place. They have guys lined up for visits. So with that, there is something else that surprised me, and I want to finish up with this. You sent me a name that I didn't know much about, and then I looked into it. Kaleb Elkins. He's
2027.
Yep. It's one thing to do well with your kids that are going to be rising seniors. This is a kid that's at Warren Central, probably the best program in the state over the last 15, 20 years. And it's a program that has had a lot of success in turning out players to go on to play at major programs. Indiana, Purdue, besides that, Notre Dame's gotten kids, Ohio State's gotten kids, Michigan, etc. He's one of the best players in the state already. He had 6 picks as a sophomore. He fits the profile of a kid that goes to Ohio State or Oregon. He's 6'3", 175 pounds, really good timing. He can hit. But most importantly, if you throw in his vicinity, it's a risk. Yeah. Indiana doesn't get those kind of kids. They already offered him, and they're involved. Now, I think it'll end up being a national recruitment. But if you don't offer early, there's no shot. So they've made the smart move. Sometimes coaches get overzealous and play the cool card. We're not going to just offer you. Please, just offer the kid, get on with it. And again, you need to hit your home state, especially Indy and Warren Central. Again, you can make an argument for other schools. Might be the most successful program in the last 2 decades in Indiana. You need to recruit there.
Well, I mean, Indiana doesn't have the status to be like, yeah, we have it down to a science where if we wait X amount of days and we wait for this program to offer, then we'll jump in. Like, no, to screw that. Like, Indiana at this point, it's get in and get after as many names as you can. And for Indiana to be the first Power 4 offer for him, that's a big deal. You and I were talking off air before we hit record, and I was asking you, does that still carry any weight? Does a program like Indiana to be the first one to offer a guy like this, does he remember that? This is going to be a long recruitment. And you said it. I think it will blow up. I think every program that's worth something in the country will get on this guy. But will he remember when Indiana was the first one to offer? I think a lot of that has to do with how active Indiana is throughout the recruitment process. As far as I know, they will be active given all the other players they talk to. But I'm curious on how much weight that will carry and if it does end up leading to something special with Elkins signing to Indiana.
Yeah, it's a possibility, but it's more than anything else. This is a trend. There's a kid from Northside in Fort Wayne that's a special player and maybe the best player in the state of Indiana, and he's really good. A big receiver is at Lawrence North that I think is an NFL kid in the junior class. He might be the most physically gifted kid in the state. Can you keep any of those kids home? The receiver, like, I have strong vibes. That's a Notre Dame, Ohio State, everybody offer early kind of deal. If they can get one of those kids and add Elkins, then they have turned the corner. At some point, you have to win a mano against the 4 schools that have destroyed Indiana recruiting forever. They're not hard to figure out. They're Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, and Notre Dame. They don't win those battles. They never win those battles. So if they're going to climb the mountain and be consistent, though, they have to do that. So I kind of want to leave it there. Jacob, any final thoughts on Indiana recruiting right now?
It's hot, man. And with the spring coming up, right, you obviously spring practice, you'll have portal. I mean, you'll have so much going on for Indiana. And recruiting, I feel like, is all of that combined with practices, with the portal, with NIL. I mean, there's so much involved with that. It's hotter than it's ever been, which for historical sakes doesn't say a whole lot. But I think it's only going to get better if Indiana can continue to keep winning on the field. Watch out. I think a sleeping giant could be brewing in Bloomington right now.
They have a chance, and they've got the facilities in NIL. So this kind of fun to see a different team kind of rise to the top. Doesn't hurt for me that it's my alma mater, but that's
right.
Another story. Anyway, thank you very much for coming on the show, Jacob. Tell everybody where they can find your work.
Yeah, if you're watching or listening on the portal, you can check it out on Locked On Hoosiers as well. We'll have it for you there on our YouTube channel and the audio pass. And so, yeah, be sure to check it out. If you want more Indiana content, Locked On Hoosiers, your daily spot for all things Indiana athletics.
Same here. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, all over the place. On YouTube, just search LO-the portal. I'm absolutely loving doing this channel. It's a lot of fun. So everybody have a good one, and we'll see you again soon.